For the first time in 27 months, Carlos and Jemima Gamares are free from the American criminal justice system. They were allowed to serve out the final months of their probation back home in Brazil. It is now ended. Yes, they were convicted of helping their daughter Marceli after she fled to Brazil with her son Nico in a nasty custody fight here in Houston. But it was clear even the federal judge was conflicted. They were the first grandparents ever convicted of this kind of crime.
Sure, they support their children, like any grandparent, like any parent would. But they don't control their daughter any more than your parents control every single one of them.
The U.S. attorney had wanted the Gamares family to pay more than $1 million in restitution to Nico's father, Houston Dr. Chris Brand. The U.S. attorney wanted the Gamares family to spend nearly 2 years in prison. The sentence for Jemima instead was just 1 month, Carlos 3. The fine to Brand, less than $40,000. That's a message. Here in Houston, their lawyer is now on a mission to prove the entire thing was a giant fraud.
They want, I think, what anybody would want, which is accountability for what's happened to them. These are two innocent people who got caught up in this fraud show.
Nico Brand's grandparents arrested this week in Miami while attempting to enter the country.
The FBI went after the grandparents in the wake of Dr. Brand's publicity campaign. He gave testimony before Congress.
This is child abduction, and child abduction is child abuse. There are times I feel like a failure because I wasn't able to protect my boy.
But it's likely the federal prosecution would never have happened if it wasn't for this guy, Houston family judge James Lombardino, now a candidate for the First Court of Appeals. Judge Lombardino had ruled there was simply no evidence that Chris Brand had ever committed domestic violence. But our viewers have seen plenty of evidence that Marceli Gamares had given that evidence to her lawyers.
The violence began even before we got married, but it escalated with time. Escalated a lot with time.
Her lawyer was Rick Ramos, now the target of multiple criminal complaints and a state bar investigation for supposedly cheating his clients.
There were documents that were not used by Marceli's counsel in the Texas divorce trial, medical records establishing the domestic violence, photos, etc., that were not used as evidence in that trial for reasons unknown.
And Nico's lawyer was Jared Woodfill. Remember this? We've all seen emails showing Marceli warned him too. And Dr. Brand's lawyer was Bobby Newman. The relationship between him and this judge has been the focus of so many of our investigative reports. Our investigation has already exposed Dr. Brand's sex addiction, evidence of domestic violence the Houston court ignored. We showed you pictures, therapy notes. Judge Lombardino never bothered to see them. We also know Dr. Brand changed his story in Brazilian courts.
We certainly know from his testimony in Brazil that he committed multiple acts of domestic violence. That's absolute and it's in the transcript.
Scarier, we actually have emails showing this doctor was triggered by naked female patients.
I discovered that he used to go to the hospital in order to satisfy his sexual desires.
And that's why the two hospitals where Dr. Brand has worked could be getting nervous.
What they knew about his tendencies, whether it's violence or sexual deviance, was equally as important to me.
Houston attorney Jeff Diamond has taken legal action against both hospitals, demanding to find out what they knew, what they may have hidden about this doctor.
One would think that if I wasn't complicit in any way with what Brand was doing, I would be happy to say, sure, here's the documents, this is everything we have.
The Harris County Health System fought us, trying to hide records of their communications with Brand. And his PR guy, Jared Genzer. We found emails proving the taxpayer-funded hospital was actually working with Brand's PR team, trying to keep you in the dark. They knew this could be a legal disaster. They also knew Dr. Brand was mostly practicing medicine somewhere else. Quoting, his primary practice is at Baylor St. Luke's, one Harris health official wrote. Thank goodness. And there are allegations Baylor College of Medicine was in on the cover-up too. We actually tipped Baylor when we found evidence Brand talked about watching porn on the hospital's computers. What did they do? They told Brand we were poking around. Now the Gamaris family alleges Baylor worked with Brand's PR team too to make false statements. Both hospitals face court hearings this week. But the investigation into Brand's alleged fraud won't stop there. Did he lie to Congress? We have video of his testimony before a House subcommittee in July of 2016.
Good afternoon, my name is Chris Brand. My son Nico was abducted from Houston, Texas, and taken to Brazil by my ex-wife 3 years ago in July of 2013.
But there was also written testimony, and it included this quote. The federal judge in Brazil noted in a ruling that Carlos helped facilitate my son's abduction. Jared Genzer issued national press releases saying the same thing. Even Brand's lawyer in Houston made the same claim in legal documents.
Brand had been touting that the Brazilian court found that Carlos and Jemima were complicit in alleged kidnapping of Nico, and had found that their conduct was criminal or certainly unlawful in nature.
Now we know just the opposite thing happened in the Brazilian court.
An order to remove Carlos and Jemima's names from the record of that case at all because there was no evidence to substantiate Brand's allegations.
Yet we knew the Justice Department moved forward to indict the grandparents anyway. And they've been fighting Dolce Fino Consulting for a year to keep some of the evidence they used in the prosecution still a secret, fighting release of FBI files, Brand's statements.
Since the document was in both Portuguese and English, there's no reason that the federal government couldn't have read the English version, unless, of course, they can't read.
Just how much did the federal government spend prosecuting Marcelli's parents? And what did it really change? The FBI needs to open its records because it's fair to ask, was the U.S. government used to punish a woman who was a victim of domestic violence? And in the end, maybe all the Gamaris family did is protect their daughter who was the victim of abuse.
They've had to spend time in federal prison because of this and didn't do anything wrong. I can only imagine that they want what I would want, which is accountability for that.